All right. Welcome, JJ, to the podcast today. I'm so happy you're here. And I just want to express my gratitude to start for sharing your book with me and coming on the podcast because through reading your book, I really feel like I know you. I have this like connection with you, and we have a lot in common. And I've learned a lot through the book. So I'm really excited to get started and just talk to you about all the things. But first off, just thank you for being here. And
Oh, my pleasure. And, it's when you're writing, you're like, oh, I just hope this resonates. I hope this all comes together at the end. So, this is great feedback and just validation. So, thank you for taking the time to read the book.
yeah, absolutely. I don't, I feel like I have to get called to a book or like there has to be something pulling me to the book. And when I came across your book and reached out and I was like, nope, this is the book that I need. And I love the way you wrote it. It's like very digestible. And there was like this ongoing resonance where I was able to just like see myself and your experiences, even though like different experiences, but the same kind of energies that we had to move through. And it just kind of felt like this mirror that I was looking at of like, okay, let's reflect on some of the things that I've done and moved through and give myself like that celebration and almost that credit because I think it was amazing just how you laid it all out. So
That's exciting. That's exciting. This is the first book I've ever put a book proposal together for. I was really hoping Hay House would pick it up, which is where I read a lot of my books.
mhm.
But, it kind of came at a time when COVID was happening and they went in a totally different direction. But it gave me this reflective time to really get clear on what I wanted to put in the book. And a lot of publishers do not like super short chapters. They don't like questions in the book. They want everything to be very symmetrical. And I feel like our journeys are not symmetrical, right? It's not what we're working through and what we're experiencing is our lessons, but they don't always come forward as such. And so having that time to really create the book in a way that it's more of a workbook than it is like, I'm going to tell you, like, let's work through this together.
Yeah, I love that. And yeah, that's exactly like how I did it. And what was nice was I could just pick it up and it didn't have to be like, oh, I need to sit down and read for this amount of time or anything. Like I just picked it up and there was great reminders in there. And then the prompts and the questions that you had were amazing. And it's really reflective of some of the work that I like to do of, okay, we can read these books, we can gain all this knowledge, but what are we doing with it? And how are we actually applying it into our life? And I think you really set us up to succeed there. So thank you. Okay. Little book shout out because it was so good. So if you guys haven't read Seeking, then please go find it and get your hands on it because it was really helpful for me and I love it. So okay,
Mm.
thank you. Before we get into some of my bigger questions, I want to do a little bit of get to know you, if that's okay. And I know I kind of sprung these on you, but I have a few get to know you questions. I'm a big human design person. I practice human design in my business and I just love it for my personal life too. So I'm curious, do you know your human design type and authority and profile?
Oh, I do. I do. I love human design. I love birth charts. I love numerology. I love anything that can give us insight into our journey. And I feel like all of those tools are magical in their own way. And there's so much to each one. But my profile's 3-5,
Mhm.
which is probably not a surprise to you, three, because I have to trial and error everything. And then I come back and put like the best practices together for other people. And that's really what I've done with all three of my books. But really, with Seeking, it's been about my spiritual journey. So five's a little tricky. I don't always understand that in the sense of five is like people are really like want to get to know you, but then they just, they may fall off or go in different directions at times you may not quite understand. And I think sometimes I'm always like, oh, why did that happen? But I've really been working with Esther Hicks's work recently to detach from what other people are doing and their decisions and even kind of how they're moving through their life. And that's really helped me be more centered and really focus on my energy level. So I'm sacral. That's my decision is sacral. And then I think, did I get them all?
Yeah. So are you a
Okay.
generator or are you a
Oh,
masculine?
yeah, generator. Yes.
Yeah. So 3-5 sacral generator. Nice. Yeah.
What do you think? I mean, am I nailing it? The 3-5? Am I
Yeah.
kind of nailing what it is?
Yeah. And I think reading your book, I'm like that person where I'm like, I try to guess people's human design like all the time. But yeah, I can see the 3-5, and that, the sixth line is really the authority, but I always tend to see that with the fifth line too, because of the problem solving. And I can see like in your stories where you have that experience of like the trial and error, and like you had to go do it this way to see if this was the best way or not or whatnot. And then there's that wisdom, that like knowledge that comes from that almost, since the fifth line is like subconscious for you, you might not always recognize it until people are coming to you or like asking you certain questions, and that response, right? Like sacral being, so you're gonna like be responding to it. And yeah, like you hit it. I was like, okay, yep, 3-5 makes sense.
Yeah,
So
and being a generator, as 70% of people are generators. It's exhausting. It can be exhausting. So, oh my gosh. But I
yeah,
actually have a reflector friend. I have several projectors. I live with a lot of Manny Gens. So it's interesting to know how people show up in the world, and used to frustrate me a little bit. My husband, he's a manifesting generator, and like he can just skip steps all the time. And I'm like running behind him, like catching things. But now I understand like that is his role. This is my role. So it gives us a little bit of permission, especially with our closer relationships, to better understand like how they show up in the world. So I'm a huge human design, you know, just I like to know people's human design too.
yeah, 100%. With the relationships, it's just helpful to know that you're a fifth line too. And there will be that like projection of, you can solve my problem for me. And
Mm.
having that discernment of, okay, I can, but is this what I'm going to do right now with my energy is key. Uh,
Yes.
and I think that just like having that awareness allows us to be more discerning, to connect with, what do I actually want to do right now, and what my truth is even. So yay. Okay. Well, thank you for sharing that. Next up, I would love to hear what lights you up right now, what you're getting curious about. This could be like a topic or anything that you're just diving into that maybe your inner child is like giddy about and you're just like super curious with.
Well, I love your questions. You could ask me questions all day. So I have been reading all summer sort of some older books. So I was reading Jane Roberts' Seth Speaks.
Mm.
And I've just been really focusing on why we're here and really what is our role on the planet. And I'm just reading so many interesting books about that. And I've been reading, obviously, if you watch my Goodreads, I read all the time. I really listen. It's just very fantastic. But right now I'm on to Esther Hicks' The Vortex,
Mm.
which is fantastic. That's actually the Vortex was a retreat that she had that was the basis for The Secret. So Rhonda that wrote The Secret attended this retreat and then went on to create The Secret. So I love getting like behind the scenes of, kind of the 12th house and birth charts of how things really work. And it's really helping me. I'm really learning how to better manage my energy based on how things are happening outside me. And I'm really focused on leveling up my frequency or my energy level to a higher frequency, because I want to be more in the flow of sort of the universal energy. So one, I have to work as hard, and two, I can manifest things easier.
Ooh, I love that. There was so much there. I was like, okay, yep. So do you find like listening or reading these different texts like helps you set that frequency and helps you like tune into what it is that you need right in the moment?
Yes. And so if anyone has ever listened to even Byron Katie, that everything that's happening outside of us is actually happening inside of us. And the whole idea of my new book Seeking is, I used to talk a lot to women about kind of making it happen, right? Whether you had young kids and you were working a high demanding job, and how do you maneuver that and keep your energy high, which was what my first book, The Working Woman GPS. My second book was all about sort of getting that promotion, getting on that board, getting in the right sponsors. That was Accelerate Your Impact. My third book, I sort of have recognized that, yes, you can be outward reaching for everything. And as you achieve those things, many of us are expecting these sensations, these validations, these levels of joy that often don't come. And that is exactly why I started this adventure in 2016 of really kind of seeking out my truth and really working from the inside out, which I think is sort of what women are going to need to do to have more seats at more tables. Because if we continue to work in this heavily masculine energy, we're not going to get much farther than we are today. And many of us, men and women, we both have feminine and masculine energy. The feminine energy is about the inner knowing, the wisdom, the intuition, the connecting with Mother Earth, the channel for more inner, like, universal knowing. And I feel like that all comes from like digging through your stories, sidestepping your self-doubt, and really allowing yourself to kind of be the energy you came in to be. And that really takes work. And you've got to do that inside work to clear the channel to pave or illuminate your path.
Mm, yes. Be the energy you came to be. I love that. And it kind of leads me into some of the other questions I want to get into. Because I think we all know conditioning and all the things that we're told to believe and do, and how does that play into this, where we know that, okay, there's got to be more to this, like what now, right? Like we're doing all this for what? And we realize that maybe we've been seeking after things that we don't want, or somebody else told us to do, or that's the next step. And I know you have experience in this, of just kind of like having that point of, wait, what am I doing this for? And there might have been that knowing where, okay, there's something there that isn't right or isn't quite my truth, right? And where does that come from? Like that knowing to knowing in your body where, okay, I have to do something different. Do you have like an
Yeah, it usually takes a while. I feel like it takes a while. You usually get a whisper or a desire, or you just want to dabble in something off the side of your desk. In fact, my third book was going to be titled Off the Side of Her Desk, because women are doing so many things off the side of their desks that really kind of feed their soul, act as fuel stations for them. But oftentimes they can't figure out the revenue stream, or they have people in their lives that are basically naysayers, like, that's never going to work. How are you going to make that happen? When are you going to make money at that? And so there's a lot we have to wrestle with internally and externally to really make that more of our main thing. And it might take you a decade. I mean, this has been a long journey for me. I've been working on bringing women together since 2008. So 15 years, I finally really feel like I am on my path. And so I wouldn't say that you have to jump or do anything immediately. I would really try to create space to listen to what is calling you. And that could be just an interest, a desire, something that you're curious about, and just check it out. Read some books, listen to some podcasts, make some phone calls, go to a retreat. Like, just check it out. Like, when you started thinking about human design, what's the first thing you did?
I Googled.
Exactly. You Google, and then did you pay for some sessions, or how did you do it?
Yeah, first I Googled and then I realized, this is above my Googling ideas. And so I looked on Instagram and found some free resources that people had created, and teachers that Raw actually taught. And then I paid for my first reading, and yeah, and then it was just a domino. But yeah,
Yes.
it
So
was
just leaning
started.
into things like that, just creating space in your schedule to lean into what is calling you. And don't worry about the how. Like, that's one big lesson I learned, is don't worry about the how. The how will be bigger and better than you could ever imagine. And anyways, it's just about taking small steps towards things that are calling you, or that are heavy on your heart, or that you really feel inspired to check out.
Mm, that, it's like that almost seems so simple, but it is very profound. And I think because we're so used to like leaving that until the end of the day, or like putting it off, like I'll do that when I have time, right? Tomorrow, the next day. And it's, if we're quote unquote busy people and we're going through the motions and we're not, and we think, okay, yeah, that's there, I want to get to that, but we kind of put that off. And that's where I think a lot of this theme of is like coming back to yourself and being really honest with, where are you putting your energy, and what are you doing with your time, and do you really want to be doing that? And it takes a certain amount of honesty to say no. And then it takes, that just change of action, or just different, whether it's communication or a different choice, to just try something different. So
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Exactly. And I feel like now is the time. I mean, depending on where you live in the world, we have access to so much more than we did even 2 decades ago, that you can do anything you want off the side of your desk.
yeah, yes. I I truly believe like if you have a desire, if there's something that you want to do or look into, whatever, like there's a reason for that and it's available to you. And I know that a lot of it is we use like time or even money. I know you mentioned money and I want to get into that, but we can easily use time and money as an excuse to not do something that we want to do. And that's something that's really passionate to me, is like encouraging people to like dig deeper in that. Like, well, what else is underneath that? Because it's very easy to say, oh, I don't have the money to do that. Or nope, I don't have time to do that. But like if there's a part of you that really desires that, then there's something else there that's just allowing you to kind of use that as an excuse. And maybe there's another fear or something else underneath. But going back to what you said, it's like you got to do the work to get curious. Like, what are the stories underneath there? So would you say that like we could use these excuses, but and they might be valid, like it might very much be in my bank account, I don't have the money to do that, but is that the only reason why I'm not going after my dreams, right? And or doing something fun, whatever it may be. But I think that there's a point where we start uncovering these layers and we really can just be honest and say, oh wow, I've used a lot of things outside of me as an excuse to not do the things that my soul actually desires. And how do we like start digging at that and not get completely discouraged?
Yeah, and that's really why I wrote the book Seeking, because I feel like it goes step by step through many of the hurdles that women are held back by, many of the pitfalls that really keep us in a holding pattern. I really sort of really looked at every aspect of the stories women have told me, the emails, and even my own life. Like, why do women sidestep themselves? And I think the first thing is self-doubt. And that's kind of why that's in a subtitle, right? So, sidestepping self-doubt is one of the biggest challenges that most people, and especially women, have. Is we have this inner voice that is trying to protect us in a lot of ways, but it is filled with fear and worry and anxiety. And if that is your main source of information, if you haven't really created the tools to allow you to see that as just one voice or one input channel, um, it can easily keep you in a holding pattern.
Yeah, definitely. How do you manage, because I know the fear and self-doubt, like it doesn't necessarily go away. It can come up, we're human, right? And how do you manage that now? Like you have the tools, you're feeling good, and then you go to do something new and it's like, oh, there it is again. How do you work through that now?
And, I actually ended up in a mindfulness class, not on purpose, like not because I was like, let me just check out mindfulness. I actually ended up going to a therapist. And I was like, gosh, I just do not have the joy I expected. I'm not really feeling like I just was so lost in my choices in so many levels. And she sent me to a mindfulness class. And I wasn't really that great of a student initially because I thought it was absolutely ridiculous. But I think once in a while we have guides in our life that usher us down certain roads that we need to travel. And I really feel like mindfulness for me was the cornerstone of the work that I'm doing now, because mindfulness gave me tools to separate myself, right? My human self from that voice in my head. And I just heard last night that your ego is really just the basic level of your soul. And if you're at like zero, you'll only hear your ego, that you really have to dive in deeper to hear that inner wisdom. But you got to kind of crack open. This is my analogy, but you have to crack open the shell, which the ego is like the shell of the yolk, the yolk getting into the real good stuff. And when you kind of don't realize you have that shell there, it's hard to get inside. And so mindfulness gives you the ability to really get inside to the good stuff. And you have to have ways to do that. And if you don't even know that your mind is just providing information nonstop to you, most of it is not very positive, you have really no way of cracking in. And so mindfulness gives you the tools to take a look at how you're talking to yourself, what's happening in your life, and how to be present, to be like an observer of that. And I just feel like I thought prior to that, mindfulness was like a goofy thing rich people did.
Well, So how do you
What do
feel?
you think?
I mean, I feel like I actually came in this whole world through mindfulness because I didn't like the way I was talking to myself. And I was like,
But
what?
how did you know? How did you know how you were talking to yourself?
So what really cracked me open, because I like that, is becoming a parent. I became a foster parent, and it was like, oh shit, like I'm about to take care of kids. I like I barely take care of myself, like kind of having this like, oh my gosh moment. And of course, knowing that like I'm capable, right? But there was like all this doubt. Like, and it was so I think the reason I recognize it so clearly is because like the 10-15 years before that, I worked really hard to like build my confidence and really just trust myself regardless of other people. And having dealt with bullying as a kid, it was just like I had done all this work where I was feeling really good, and then all of a sudden I step into this new role and I'm like, oh wow, like there's a lot here that it's like just coming in. And part of that was, I had gotten into like some more of the yoga classes and just meditation and like not knowing what I was doing. And then stepping into parenthood, I was like, what is all of this in my head that's telling me that I'm going to suck at this, that like I can't trust myself and all this. And it was very uncomfortable. And dealing with like affirmations and like try to stay positive, I was like, no, like there's got to be something different because this isn't working. And that's when I found Dr. Joe Dispenza. And so then I was like all into the mindset work and brain rewiring. And it's interesting because I know, like, I've had the conversation of like, do you have an inner dialogue? And not everybody does. And I didn't know that. And so I'm like, oh, so like not everyone just observes their thoughts naturally. And like, you know, so I had to, it was a lot of like breaking down, but I think the mindset thing for me was like tangible. And like as my human self, my ego really wanted something like, okay, my brain is here and that's what's operating this. And for me, it was almost like this makes sense. So my brain can kind of work with that. And I remember the first like time that I fully felt in my body that like I changed a belief. And I was like, oh, this is powerful. And I then, started pulling tarot cards, oracle cards, got into spirituality. And I was like, you know what? There's a lot of talk about your mind and your ego kind of like shaming it. And I'm like, no, I know the magic of it because I just did some of this brain rewiring work. And I love like having my mind's voice. Like I value it, but I also know that like now it doesn't always serve me. It's not always going to give me the best information or for my highest good, even because there's all these other voices that I can tune into. And having that journey, I realized that yes, there is like this identification that you have to have with like, oh, this is like coming from this energy, where if I just tune into a different frequency, I say just, you got to learn how to do that, but tuning into a different frequency, whether that's your intuition or your spirit guides or your soul or whatever, like you can tune into your mind without all like and observe the fear, right? Like you don't have to like necessarily hear it all, but like you can observe it all and playing with that. So it's like me, I really like see my mind as part of me, right? Like it's nothing apart from me. But I get to co-create with it. Like I get to use it because it's a genius. It does all this stuff for me that like I don't even have to think about. So I have a very unique relationship with my mind and my ego. And it really was like when I showed it some love, it really just like introduced me to my soul, like here's the thing that I think you actually want to talk to, but we're kind of like this gatekeeper. And I liked your analogy of the egg, because it's like without having the mindset work, that mindfulness, it's like once you tap into that, then it's almost like there's this clarity and this confidence with where you're accessing this information, where you're tuning into. So
That's beautiful. That's beautiful. And I love that the catalysts were kids because I do feel like kids are brought to us to remind us why we're here. And so I think that's just so beautiful that that was sort of your point where you're like, wait a minute, I need to figure this out. And I feel like that happens for a lot of people. Some people it doesn't,
Mhm.
but that's pretty exciting. And I love the idea and the books you're reading. Yes, Joe Dispenza is great. I have another woman I work with that, I mean, he has healed her life, healed her life.
Mm,
She had a really intense autoimmune disease, and Joe Dispenza is the one that really helped her get out of the wheelchair and off of all the glutens and sugars. And she is completely a vegan
mm,
chef now for other people that have similar challenges. So I
mm.
love his work.
Yeah,
And I think your point too is like it all works in combination with each other, but for many people, their ego energy is like the driver, the passenger, and the people in the back seat. And I think we need to even out that equation in the car of who's driving you and where are they taking you.
100%. I love that. Yeah, our ego and our mind is just a portion of us.
Yes. And I don't know
Um,
where all these analogies are coming from today, but I like them.
I like them. I love it. Um, yeah, and that reminds me, so okay, so I wanted to ask you about, you brought up masculine and feminine energies earlier, and I wanted to ask you about how maybe like the ease of life has shifted since really tuning in, like where your masculine and feminine energy was at before, and knowing like we all have both and needing that balance. So as your journey went on, like how did you see that like the balance of these energies is actually like creating ease or maybe not in your life, and how you adjusted to that?
Well, I spent the first 2 decades in high tech, most of which in Silicon Valley. So I was super masculine energy. And it took me a while to decouple from that. I really defined myself by all the metrics, the labels, the titles, the salary, the experiences. And when I shifted to this work of writing and being a tool and resource for people to really catapult in the desired direction, whatever desired direction they had, it was it was really hard. It was really hard to make that shift. But I would say now I'm almost 10 years into it. And I would say that I am so much more impactful than I was then because I essentially was using only half my toolkit and leaving the other half at the door. And so now I really have such awareness, vision, and just like awareness of what's happening at any one moment, vision for what is possible, and also the patience that I probably didn't have then that I am co creating with the energies that are helping me manifest what is next. And so I really work to not move my energy in any distinct way too fast and furious. Where before I was like a bull in a china shop just trying to get things done. Now I know that like everything has its divine timing and I just need to show up every day and work in that direction. And the phone calls happen and the invitations happen and the connections happen much more fluidly than they did a decade ago.
Hmm. Yeah, so there's like this contrast of like forcing things or like almost like that like to the grind, like work to the grind and like push things. I don't know, but I keep like sensing like forceful energy versus like allowing things to work out for you, allowing things to come to your door. And I feel like this all kind of starts with that intention, like getting really clear on what are your intentions.
Yeah, and not worrying so much about exactly how everything's going to happen. Like I was really big that I had to produce everything that came my way. And if I didn't have a direct touching it or impact with it, then it really wasn't mine. And things have come my way multiple times now that I really had nothing to do with, but that are kind of available to me. And I am still amazed, but also like more open to receive it. I wasn't receiving before because I was so stubborn on how it had to arrive.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah. So releasing those expectations and just surrendering to what's
Mm-hmm.
available to us. I love that. So you brought up money. There's quite a few tips in the book around money or things to think about around money. And I just want to bring this up because I've been diving into this a lot myself lately. And just, was there a shift? Like, was there a moment where you realize like, oh, our energy is affecting our relationship with money? And like, did you notice this and like, did you make changes, or was it a matter of like just kind of observing and seeing like how you shifted and changed through your journey, and then did that naturally change, or were you more intentional with it?
Well, I go through about 3 chapters about money because it starts way back when you're young. Oftentimes, they're money stories, whatever they may be. And I go through all different types of money stories. And then also the lessons I've learned from the various authors I've read and courses I've taken. But the idea that, it was not overnight that I recognized I needed money, like help, really what is the frequency I'm giving money, what's the power I'm giving money, and is that advantageous for what I am working on manifesting? And I think, I listened to Oprah pretty much every day in the 80s and early 90s, and she had authors on there before, but it didn't resonate with me until like 19 or 19, I'll be okay, 20, 15, 2016 is when I really started to recognize and hear the messages about money that got me diving into Lynn Twist's book and Denise's book. She's out of Australia. And it wasn't until I wasn't ready until then to really get in. And what happened is I left my high tech, high paying job out of Silicon Valley to write my next book. And I defined myself by my salary, my title, my company. And when I let all of those things go, I didn't know who I was. And I had to really sort of work through that, which was ugly at times, like really figuring out like who I am and how I value myself, because I've been such a producer for so long that it was easy to kind of latch onto those accolades, which when those disappear, who are you really?
Mm. Yeah. So did you, there's like multiple things going through my head right now. uh so for money, was there like the fear, did you have like that fear of like leaving your job? And of course, I mean, of course you did. It's kind of a silly question. I'm sure there were fears there, but was that, I know you said there wasn't a moment, but I'm curious if there was like this, if you have this experience of, because for me, I really am coming to this point where like money is like literally here to support us. And I'm thinking about all the ways I've talked about money or handled money or tried to call in money, but like what energy am I using that or attempting to do that from? Whereas like I need the money now versus like I'm going to call in the money to have this. And so like having that awareness, it's like, okay, I can know that, but like when I go and be that, like it feels very resistant almost, because I've had all these years of thinking money is hard to get. I have to work hard for it. It has to be a struggle. And once I get it, it leaves, all these beliefs, those are all mine. If anyone's curious, that I've really had to like dismantle and be like, okay, actually money's here to work with me. And and I call her she's an energy, because if I personify her, I'm a lot nicer to her. And
Ah,
it's like I had this moment where it's like, okay, I know all of this, but I'm obviously not like living this. And I know from like the masculine energy of corporate and then like going into this other way of receiving and earning money even is like can really trip people up. And there's so much fear that can rise up because it's like the safety of knowing what's coming from, and this could be like leaving any 9 to 5 job and then like trying to have a business that you want to replace the income. It's like, well, this is known, right? And that's where even our ego can come back in and say, well, like, you already know that this works, so let's do this. But the energetics of money is like, how can we really just trust ourselves that like in the universe and money of like it's going to be there when I am clear on my intentions. Excuse me. And it's like, how do you trust that when you have a life full of experience of it not working out that way?
the thing that I had to do, and I appreciate that because it's not a light switch. You're not going to just one day feel like, oh my gosh, money's a frequency and I'm going to generate this frequency. Like it took me a long time to figure out like how to view money, how to receive money, which I had a really hard time doing is receiving. how to even receive gifts or receive the things the universe is bringing to me, which may not be a direct line, right? It might be coming through other people or other experiences. And so through the books that I read, and even what I talk about in the book Seeking, is the gratitude. You have to have gratitude for what you already have before the universe is going to bring you more. And so if that is having gratitude for the 2 cents in your wallet, the stuff in your cupboards, having gratitude for someone who brings you maybe a coffee, or maybe, somebody gives you an upgrade at a restaurant. You're supposed to have X, but they decide to throw in something. Like everything that comes your way, having gratitude, because the universe really wants you to recognize all that is available to you before it gives you additional stuff. And I feel like that's what I've really had to work on, is the gratitude. And I've been working with another woman on this, and it's amazing how much she has gotten, right? So she's older, but she has gotten free air conditioning, and she received a super great discount on a dishwasher. And the state has come in and done other stuff in her home. And she works on the free site on Facebook, and all these things that she needs to grow and build and her garden, because she sells fresh flowers, like free seeds. So it's really a mind shift of recognizing that you can't always anticipate the way it's going to come to you, but if you have gratitude for where you are, and you're present in the moment, it's amazing how much is available to help you on your path.
Yes, absolutely. I love that. Gratitude, that frequency, and like getting into the frequency of gratitude is like an instant shift, right? Like an instant frequency shift, rather than worrying like, okay, when's this money going to come in, or how am I going to make this money? And knowing what you're going to do with it, like that goes back to having the intention. Like talking to people who want to manifest, $2,000, and I'm like, well, what do you want to do with it? And they're like, I don't know. I'm like, well, there's that helps with that intention, and then the gratitude for the aftermath, I feel like. So yes, definitely the gratitude. Okay, I'm switching it up a little bit. Lots to talk about life's work, and I'd love to just hear how your definition of life's work and how that relates to maybe somebody trying to figure out their purpose, and what this kind of feels like and looks like for you.
That's a great question. I used to think your life's work is this big, grand thing, but I have learned that your life's work is your journey. And your journey is really sort of moving through the lessons that come your way and the opportunities that present themselves. Because I believe that your life is already sort of mapped out in a lot of ways of why you're down on the planet. You've agreed to be down here. There's certain work you're supposed to be doing, but oftentimes we can't tap into that knowing or those whispers because we're so busy in our heads, or focusing on the future or reflecting on the past. So I think for many of us, the first step in your life's work is getting quiet and really understanding like what is happening within you. What is the conversation you're having? How are you feeling? Are you getting any intuition or lessons or wisdom coming your way? And how are you acting upon that? I talk a lot in the book of things that came my way years before I actually activated it, because my first response was, yeah, who am I? How is that going to happen? That message isn't for me. I don't know what that means. And I feel like now, as that I'm older, and this has happened many times now, I am a lot more open to what is brought forward to me, whether through, a message, call, an internal whisper, however it comes to me. I'm more curious in my life than I've ever been. And that has really helped me sort of move through opportunities and take like take it in fully, rather than letting my ego kick in and tell me all the things of why it's not going to happen. Yeah.
Yeah, okay. I like that. I feel like as you were talking, the word curious and just like being playful and releasing expectations on how things are going to play out. It feels like very like a child, right? Like loving your inner child is a big part of healing, for one. But I think about how much we stray away from being curious, allowing things to happen for us, not questioning things, and like just kind of being in that surrender, playful energy, which of course I'm all about. But it's like how much are we actually doing that and allowing it to serve us, and like trusting that that's actually what we're here to do, is like play with life. And I feel like that's kind of just what you just described. So it feels refreshing to hear that. Like, if we want to take out all the hard things and like, what do I need to do? I think it really just comes down to like getting curious about yourself and allowing other things to unfold as you're following that curiosity.
Yes, and giving yourself that permission. I think a lot about it is just self permission because we've been programmed at such an early age to do and be and create and design and get there and get the money and get the house and get the marriage and get this and get that and get that. That after you do a lot of those things, one, you're exhausted, but two, you're like, what the heck did I do all this for? And so, really deprogramming that as soon as you can is great. And you're actually seeing this in the younger kids. They're not as tied up as our generation was. And I'm much older than you, but I feel like things are shifting on the planet. They're coming in a lot more enlightened than we were. And I think we have a lot to learn from them. And I also think there's a lot for us to do if we really feel like we're on the brink of being overworked or asking, what is this all for? That really is just the beginning of your real journey.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Yeah. The kids, I mean, let alone my own kids teach me a lot. That's a different story. I mean, that's the same story, but in a different way. But even the kids, like any kid that we come across, I love going places and like paying attention, like airports or anywhere where there's like a big mixture of people, or like you can really just like tune into the kids, and like that's really what like where a lot of wisdom is. And I just like to observe them, and like, they're not stressed out, they're not worried about what's coming next, and they just trust that they're in, I mean, of course, as long as they're taken care of and they feel safe, like they really are following their bliss. And that's something that I think is huge for all of us and we can learn from. So
So much so. So much so. Yes.
okay, wrapping up, I want to talk about impact because you mentioned it before, it's mentioned in the book, and just how returning to yourself, and you talked about like that balance of masculine and feminine energy earlier, is like that will amplify your impact. So I have a couple questions. Did you always, okay, how do I want to word this? Do do you think everyone like wants to leave an impact? I know if you're listening to this podcast, you do, but like, I feel like there's also a point where you like can say, oh, I actually do want to leave an impact, a legacy, whatever it may be, like an imprint. And like, do you believe that all of us come here with that desire?
That's a great question. I do a lot of keynote speaking for women's groups, and I often ask them, how many of you want to have more influence and impact than you have today? And I would say 80% of the people raise their hand, but there's always people that don't. And, we all have our own roles here. We all have our own roles. And some of us might be impactful, but don't really categorize it as impactful, right? So people that, maybe are working with their parents or their kids, or maybe they're just helping the local neighborhood start a farmer's market, or, teaching people how to sew. I think some people, when they use their natural gifts, they don't think of it as a gift. They just think of it, well, this is what I know. Here, I'll show you how to do it. So I think sometimes we don't credit ourselves enough on what we are sharing and giving. And so for those of you that don't want to leave a bigger impact, that's okay. It's okay. But for those of you that do, we often have to really get into ourselves and understand, how are we talking to ourselves? What are we paying attention to? What are we sharing? And how are we really creating space for what is calling us?
Hmm. I like that. I've always what you said there is relatable to me. I'm a second line in human design, and that's like the natural, and it's my conscious line. And I often have it reflected to me like, you're really good at this, and I just don't see it. And a lot of my confidence and momentum is propelled by getting like reflections to me, because I just don't see it in myself all the time. And being able to recognize that has increased my impact. And so it's like, I love what you said about, you know, not everyone is here to necessarily claim like this is going to be the impact that I make. Like they're going to have an impact in their own way, just being here or through the stuff that they do. And that's so true because I'm a big person on like what is the definition of this word that we're talking about and how does it relate to everyone differently. And so like impact, some people might say that's like related to success or related to their destiny, who knows. And like really defining that for ourselves of like what is impact and like do we want to have that here, and if not, like is there something else that we could use in place of that word to say, yeah, this is like what we want to do while we're here or leave when we're gone, whatever. And I think, you know, it's so individual that really reading your book was just like reminded me that like I can learn from all these people and I can take all these classes and do all these courses, but like I have to bring it back to myself and discern like, is that true for me? And like be honest and then go forth with, okay, yes, this part's true, maybe this part isn't, and go forward with that and then remain open. So I loved that answer. Thank you for sharing that.
Hmm. Well, I know you're impactful. I mean, just the fact that you listen to the calling of starting this podcast, which is so fabulous. I think you are well on your way to the impact that you're going to make over a series of your life, which you already have for so many people, both in your network and also in your home. And I think for many of us, we think it has to be like this Oprah-like moment. And honestly, there's only a small percentage of the people that are going to make like be at that level. And I think whatever level you're at, and if you feel like you are like aligned or you are moving through your journey, it is likely you're making an impact.
Yeah, 100%. I love that. Okay. Well, before we wrap up, I want to give you an opportunity to share anything exciting you're working on, and then also how all of the listeners can get in contact with you. And of course, we will link everything below.
Thanks so much. So I'm working on a global wellness destination. The universe has granted me this amazing estate on Lake Erie, and it was for sale for 10 years, and it has come into my sphere. And I am receiving it, even though I did not like directly pay for it, but I'm receiving it. And light workers are coming to me, and the Palladians are coming, and the energy of the man who owned the house, the man and the woman are also there. And it is a huge collaboration with this side and the other side to really bring people to a place to connect, sometimes heal, and really learn strategies to awaken and invigorate their soul for their work here on the planet. And so that's what I'm working on. Through that, I've interviewed a lot of light workers, energy practitioners, and practices that really help us kind of create more light, remove the darkness, work through our own stories. And I'm starting season 2 of that. And I've created a community Together We Seek online where you can meet with them directly. So you don't have to be Googling for certain people. You can actually go in the community and find trusted resources from a trusted network. And so that's super exciting. And for those of you that are active readers, you can always find me on Amazon. You can even just put seeking, the word JJ, and the number 74, and it seems to pop up. And I really feel like that book is a bridge book for a lot of people that feel like there is more, but they're not sure how to access it.
Yes, awesome. That is so exciting about the property, and getting that set up is going to be amazing. We need more spots that are going to be all high frequency. And are you you're gonna have like events there and everything?
Yeah. I'm already having events there. I got a whisper in 2016 to bring the women together outside, which I didn't know what that meant. And so I really started going to my light workers saying, how can you, what should I do with this? And so in 18, I had my first retreat. And I think I'm starting my 9th or 10th retreat that I'm having in a couple weeks. So I feel like it's exactly where the universe wants me to be. And it really doesn't, it's a lot of work to get all the pieces together, but it also doesn't feel like work either, if that makes sense. And so it's taken me a long time to sort of get in this flow. But now that I'm here, it's amazing how things are kind of coming to me.
I love that. That is like knowing you're a generator and just following what has lit you up and like receiving. Like go back to that receiving, and
Receiving.
I'm gonna have
Yes.
to make sure I stay in touch with you to just kind of follow that journey of yours, because that is so exciting and something that I see myself doing in the future too. So
Oh, good. Well, hopefully we'll do it together here on
I
the water. It's
know.
really just magical. It's absolutely magical here. And I feel like the property's been waiting for me, honestly. And it's so crazy to say that because it's already been in my sphere for 3 years, but it's taking me this long to like understand what is really happening.
I have no doubt that it's been a connection that has been there and is now manifesting in the physical. And so I'm so excited for you
So
and
exciting. It's
everyone.
absolutely so exciting. So thank you for the opportunity to join you and thank you for taking the time to read Seeking. It's unbelievable like that this is where I am. And I think for any of you, I would say don't dream too small because you really have no idea. If you really create the space, use the mindfulness, work on gratitude, having gratitude for things in your life, and really believing that you are part of something much bigger, it's amazing how things will unfold for you.
Yes, thank you for that. Amazing tips at the end, all the way through. I appreciate you so much for being here, and thank you again. We will talk to you all next time on the playground.